Hello and welcome to the CivilTalk podcast. I'm your host, Tapasio Althouse. If you're new to the show, this is where we explore civility and social emotional learning with esteemed guests, expert insights, and practical advice to help people navigate the world. Today, we're excited to have Jennifer Miller on the show. Jennifer is a leader in SEL with nearly 30 years of experience, where she began her journey working in dropout prevention with communities and schools. Over the years, she has led transformative change in classrooms and school systems, helping teachers engage students, motivation, and build strong, trusting connections. She is the author and illustrator of Confident Parents, Confident Kids, Raising Emotional Intelligence in Ourselves and Our Kids, which helps parents and the kids they love hone their emotional intelligence so they can make wise choices, connect, and communicate well with others. Jennifer is also the founder of the organization of the same name, which has built an international platform through her blog with over 23,000 followers in 152 countries. Her insights have been featured in NBC's Today Parenting and Parent Magazine, and she has published peer-reviewed research on SEL and parenting. Today, we'll dive into Jennifer's wealth of knowledge, discussing practical strategies for fostering social and emotional growth for parents and their children, as well as her work with various organizations. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today. I love focusing on CivilTalk, particularly at this moment in time. So I'm eager to get started.
Right? It's a very apropos moment. You know, it's September 2024, elections are upon us. Like, there's definitely, that's funny you mentioned that. There's a real energy in this particular moment in time for our listeners. If you are listening like a year later, you know, knowing the date, this is a very interesting time. So yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation and obviously have you on the show as well. So with that, we'd love to hear more about your background and, you know, how you got started in social emotional learning, specifically with parents, teachers, and children.
Yeah, I was fresh out of college with an advertising degree of all things, and did a year of service in Oklahoma, and I worked with a Native American boarding home. And my job was really enrichment in whatever way I could provide enrichment. And I spent the entire year very much learning about the children, learning about the Chickasaw Nation who I worked with. And what I realized through that year, service is always about learning, right? Is that children's social and emotional development was what I spent all my time on in order to promote their school success. And that includes their cultural pride and knowledge. These children were taken away from their families. Some families chose to send their children to this boarding school, and they didn't know much about their cultural heritage. And so I brought in artists and residents from the Chickasaw Nation and began to help them learn their language and learn arts, Chickasaw arts, and really begin to understand their own identity through their cultural knowledge. That set me on a course. So I was sold after that. No advertising for me. I really felt like if I'm going to make a meaningful contribution, then I want to look for ways to help children develop socially and emotionally, because it is far too little focused on in our homes, in our schools. And it is the thing that helps children be successful in life. So when I became a parent, I worked in social emotional learning, became a parent, and I was traveling around to schools doing professional development in social emotional learning, and I had this baby at home. And it is incredibly challenging being a new parent, as all parents know. And I kept asking the question, how am I going to do what I'm teaching in schools in the raw, messy context of family life? How am I going to teach my kid empathy and communication and self awareness and self-management when I'm busy and exhausted and working all day, and in this informal setting where there's not a curriculum necessarily, right? So I wanted to learn about that, and that's really how Confident Parents, Confident Kids was born. I wanted to base my growing knowledge, self-knowledge about my parenting in child development research, so that I felt confident that I was doing what I could to change patterns from my own upbringing that I wanted to change, and really to be the best parent I could be. And so it started as a learning community and has just grown up as a learning community. And I continue, now that I'm a parent of a teenager, to learn from other parents of teenagers who are in the confident parents community. And we talk all the time about the hot topics of parenting. You're always growing and learning in that area.
Wow, that's amazing. I'd love to hear more about confident parents and confident kids. I was sifting through it and going through a few of the tips, and just for our listeners so they understand, it's a comprehensive guide that helps parents nurture emotional intelligence in their children, as Jennifer was saying earlier. But you have tidbits and you have scenarios specifically in that book that really dive into helping children and parents. I'd love to hear more about specific scenarios and practical advice that parents can have when they are at home and they're tired and maybe not feeling the most confident. How do they sort of step aside and impart that confidence within their kids, so generational trauma and problems don't sort of pass on and carry on?
There are some really simple things I think that parents can do. First of all, just owning the fact that we have big feelings in families. Oftentimes, feelings are not convenient. Oftentimes, the darker emotions are ones we want to sweep under the rug and not deal with. We often don't have time for the pain, but our children will feel pain. We will feel pain. And so, thinking about, reflecting on, and planning ahead for big feelings really can make all the difference in how we bring our emotional intelligence to our daily lives. For example, your child is going to get angry. You know that they might be overtaken by fear or worry. What's your response in that moment? You also know that you are going to be overtaken by anger or worry. So, what's going to be your response in that moment? And often it involves, for us as parents, pausing, maybe stepping away. I love like working with parents of younger children. They typically will say to me, I can't leave. I've got a little person. It's not safe for me to leave the room. And so instead of leaving the room, they go inside, they close their eyes, they take a moment, they calm down, they lower their heart rate, they feel their heartbeat come down as they take that pause. And that is such a twofer, because we are modeling in that moment for our children that we don't have to be immediately responsive.
Right.
They can wait. Their anger and upset can wait while we calm down. And it helps everyone in the family self-regulate when we are working on our self-regulation skills. So planning ahead for big feelings is a big one. Another one is we will fight. Families fight. It's not a weakness. It's not a horrible thing or a condition of some families and not others. Families fight. So then how do you set up boundaries, rules, conditions, ways to argue that are constructive, that are healthy, that build your relationship versus tear down your relationship? And if you're watching the political debates, it's kind of a guide to what not to do
Okay.
in family arguments. We don't want to blame, get defensive, show contempt, mock, call names, use physical force. Like these are all no-nos. These are all destructive to relationships. Uh, Yet I think it is really easy to skip to judgment, to criticize. And we're surrounded in an environmental context through social media, through our everyday interactions where judgment is a regular part of conversation. So it may be a little bit harder in family life to remember that it needs to be a judgment-free zone of people and their character, not of ideas. We need to judge ideas, but we need to be careful not to judge one another, and kind of to take responsibility for our own feelings, for our own roles in the problem, and then get curious about other people's thoughts and feelings so that we can work together to solve a problem.
Right. I love this. It really encapsulates self-awareness. And sometimes I feel even as an adult, people are very far removed from that self-awareness. So teaching that at a really early age and being around the criteria that involves that, I think is really important. How do you cross over into the school platforms, with your own children and your immediate family? It seems to be one sort of style. How do you cross over into the academic platforms? And what are some common challenges that you see with educators when trying to integrate SEL into their own classroom?
That's such a good question. I think that if you think about social and emotional development and the skills that we are trying to build, these they're often called soft skills, but they are some of the hardest skills to learn. If we're looking at uh, self-awareness, social awareness, self-control, right? These are really working through conflict. They're hard skills. And understanding how our children are changing socially and emotionally by age and stage is something that teachers are not typically trained in their college teacher prep programs. That's starting to change, but they often have to learn on the fly in the classroom about children's social and emotional development. And our parents are learning uh, about their children's social and emotional development at the same time. So there really is this opportunity for partnership in learning about how to support children's social and emotional development from the home and school perspective. Yet we see divisions, and I work with schools a lot. I work with educators a lot. I am an educator, and I feel a lot of fear and resistance from teachers. And when you talk about involving parents, and there's good reason for it. They've had a parent that has attacked them, that has criticized them, and so they're scarred from that interaction. So part of the bridging, creating trusting relationships between schools, between teachers, and between and parents is just beginning that relationship and getting to know one another and creating safety, because there is this kind of fear on both sides. Parents fear what's happening at school, teachers fear criticism from home, but creating those personal relationships, saying I'm in this with you, we are learning together, can make all the difference in supporting that partnership throughout the school year.
That's amazing. So what programs are intact right now? So on the podcast thus far, we've had a lot of people who are in the college atmosphere. And so I know that within K through 12, I've seen CASEL, I think it's called, CASEL.
Mhm.
And so what programs are implemented right now that are helping educators with this? Because like you said, soft skills, it's not they're hard skills. They're hard skills to manage. They're hard skills to teach young kids. Are educators kind of thrown into their own devices, to deal with social emotional learning, or are there programs already intact, or do we just need 100 Jennifer Millers coming into each school and talking about this? Because I'd love to know what programs educators have, and if so you can be a sort of resource for that on this show, and what teachers can implement today in their class to sort of help with that, especially if parents aren't really doing that in their own home.
Yes. So there are so many research-based social and emotional learning curricula that schools are using throughout the country. Some of them are K-6, some of them are K-8, some of them are high school specific. But there are many, many. And in fact, you mentioned CASEL. I worked for CASEL many years ago, and they provide a guide that reviews the research base and also the core components of each social emotional learning curriculum that is research based. And they review on school family partnerships, so you can take a look at their list and look at academic impact. That you might want to look at literacy or reading components, math components. You can look at different issues, but one of them is school family partnerships and whether that social and emotional learning curriculum involves school family partnerships in its core program. But I think CASEL now has 99 uh, CASEL approved programs. And so there are many to choose from. And in fact, most states have now standards that are either standalone or they're baked into academic standards that are that require social and emotional learning in schools. So there is a policy structure for it. And the trick is schools finding the supports, the professional development in order to do it. I I I believe I'm one of the few that is so focused on parenting and family. So my content, Confident Parents, Confident Kids, looks at home life and how it plays out in the practical day-to-day routines of and challenges of home life.
Right. So from your bio, you've contributed to major platforms like NBC and PBS. What is the most pressing message you aim to get across to a wider audience about SEL? And I'd love to hear about your international audiences too, and how that differs internationally as far compared to U.S. audiences.
Those are really good questions. So the first, I think Actually, could you repeat the first? Because I focused on international. Could you
Yeah, that
repeat
was
the
kind of
first
a two-in-oneer. So sorry to
Yeah,
hit.
no, it's
Uh,
okay.
yeah. So the pressing, when you're on, bigger shows like NBC and PBS,
Oh, okay.
what is the most pressing message you aim to get across to a wider audience about SEL? There's so much encapsulated in SEL and civility and teaching, young adults. What is the most pressing message you hope to relay to your wider audience?
Because the audience that I focus on are parents, the main issue, the main topic I want to get across, or the main message, is that if we parent on instinct alone, we tend to repeat the patterns that were our parenting training, our own upbringing.
Mhm.
And uh, there are assets for most in that, but there are also liabilities. And so, if we want to parent in a way that is truly aware and aligns with our values and the current context of today, we need to reflect on how we are dealing with our big feelings and how we are responding to our children's big feelings and our major challenges. If we are reflective about those challenges, we can ask, what am I learning? And how is this an opportunity to promote social and emotional intelligence in my child? And also, how is this an opportunity to promote social and emotional intelligence in myself? Because we know that we are the best models and the first teachers of emotions and social skills for our children.
Yeah, lovely said. And then for the second question, your blog has a global reach. How do you think SEL challenges differ in international contexts compared to what you have found in the US?
That is a really good question. I'll just use a particular example. I met with a group of Chinese educational leaders, and they had read my book and were very much interested. They had a parent academy at their school where they actually had parents coming in after school and learning about parenting and really working on addressing challenges. And so their concerns were perhaps different, but
Mhm.
also very similar in some ways to challenges that I hear from American parents, such as academic pressures. How do we deal? We want our kids to perform. We want them to work hard. How do we motivate our kids when they don't feel like doing homework? How do we deal with frustrations when our kids are done and we need them to work harder? So we had a lot of good conversation about academic pressures and stresses. And I've had that same kind of conversation with American parents. So there are definitely differences, but there are more similarities, I feel like, in trying to understand what we can learn from our challenges.
Yeah. Are there any digital factors with international audiences as there are with domestic audiences as far as, setting boundaries and, grappling with the problems that come with social media and that come with, you know, we grew up in an age where we didn't have the internet in our pockets, and having to deal with children who have that. How do you implement that into your work?
I I don't know of a single parent who doesn't struggle with that issue. It is a really difficult one, and it's one that we have no playbook for. None of us were raised as digital natives. It is completely new to us. So our children having a smartphone in their back pocket or in their hand at all times, and having access to content that we struggle to keep safe is something that is so challenging. I hear from a lot of parents that they have a lot of fears about what the kind of content that their children are seeing or could be exposed to, and how much time children are on screens. There are so many issues that parents worry about. The thing that I try to focus on with parents is self-control, building self-control, and helping children internalize the skills of managing their technology instead of parents trying to control it for them. Because as you add devices in your household, a game console, a smartphone, a laptop, and a tablet, parents cannot manage all of those devices and keep up with children. So there are certainly controls that you can set, but more importantly, how is the conversation about their digital community and how they're participating in their digital community a regular part of your conversation? And how do you treat your children as the digital natives they are and allow them to teach you about what they're encountering online, on apps, so that you're learning from them, so that they feel safe to come to you and talk about what they're encountering. And you are offering them feedback on how to review what they're going to look at so that they can become better managers of their either developmentally appropriate or inappropriate content.
Right. I love that idea of making it a conversation and not so much parents as being just police all the time. That's a really great idea. And it's like, if you have kids who are into video games, maybe try to play a video game with them, instead of being like, you can't do this and you can't do that. Engaging in an appropriate video game together as an activity sounds like the right way to go.
I love that. And in fact, teachers, there are great ways to incorporate Minecraft learning into the curriculum. And you can do that at home, but I think treating your children as teachers of digital content is one way that they can feel a sense of agency, and you can kind of create this dialogue that is ongoing.
Yeah, I love that. I never thought of it like that, which is funny because I was right on the cusp of not having the internet and having the internet, so I'm kind of like straddling the two. But that's a really interesting thought. I'd love to hear more about your blog, which is really interesting. It is also called Confident Parents, Confident Kids, and I'd love to hear more about the resources on your blog. And you mentioned earlier you get together with a lot of parents, which I think is really crucial for parents to sort of like establish a community. I'm in LA. I know it's really hard for parents to get together sometimes. I'd love to hear how parents could get together in their own cities and just the various resources you have on your blog.
I love it. Maybe you have seen in the news that recently the Surgeon General released a report on the crisis that parents are facing in well-being and mental health. And he lists many different factors, technology being one of them, but also the fact that parents feel very isolated. Parenting is incredibly challenging, and we can feel really isolated. And also, parenting was not meant to be a single solitary activity. It is an activity that requires a village. We need schools, we need neighborhoods, we need community organizations, we need grandparents, we need aunts and uncles. We need a lot of support in order to really provide the enrichment that our children need in order to raise them. So it shouldn't be all on parents to do the raising. So Confident Parents, Confident Kids as a blog is really, I think of it as a learning community, even though it's a digital space and we do connecting on Zoom and webinars. But it really is a place where parents and caregivers can come and feel like we are learning together about our children's development by age and stage. We're talking about the things that are hardest for us and not feeling like we are failing or our children in some way, but really coming with our vulnerability and the fact that parenting requires a lot of trial and error and a lot of mistakes. There is no such thing as perfect parenting. But if we learn together and we bring the research into the mix, we can really all be better parents for our children. So it's a powerful thing. And I have 7 writers, kind of lead writers now, who are all across the country, and they are all experts in their own right. And they're also all trying to do this hard thing, which is parenting. And so whenever we get together, we do the same thing. What's going on? Well, I have a teenager and he was invited to an unsupervised party this weekend. I don't know whether I should let him go, and we have to have the alcohol conversation and the drug conversation. And what do we do with that? And so there are so many important topics to raise and support one another on.
Right. What sort of advice can you give to parents who, on a day-to-day basis, going to their kids' school? Do you recommend just going up to other parents and just saying, hey, I'm Jennifer Miller, I'd love to get your contact? Like, what little things can parents do other than things that are digital on a day-to-day basis that can help them sort of establish a community with, their immediate area?
That's such a good question. And I think it comes down to showing up, which sounds super simple, but physically being at pickup or being at drop off. It's so easy to strike up conversations with other parents when you are physically present around the school. And of course, during the pandemic time, we really suffered with not being able to be in person to develop those relationships. But now it's possible. So how can you show up for parent night and strike up conversations with the person next to you? How can you look for small ways to get involved? Schools have many volunteer opportunities if you only look for them. And I know we're all busy, but if you do a volunteer opportunity, you end up meeting more parents, and you work side by side on taking the welcome bags to the houses, for example. And so just getting involved and showing up can be surprisingly nurturing, because all of a sudden you are developing relationships in your school community. And parents need that sense of belonging just as much as students do. So it really makes a difference.
I love that. Thinking about my high school time too, I was like trying to think of like how my parents got involved. And my parents I was in Girl Scouts up until my senior year of high school. Wow. And that's kind of how I know. And that's kind of like how my parents got involved, because, they would interact with the other parents. Who's going to be in front of Ralph's at this time, and, all these other things. Or we would do, the medal awards or whatever. And, thinking about what you're saying right now, when parents become more involved, it means that your children are involved too. It means that your children are being active. They're in clubs. They're being, they're strengthening their soft skills. They're utilizing it. So it's really a two-way street, I think. And I love that about what you just said, because the more parents involved, truly, the more your children are going to be involved, which can only benefit.
It's so true. And when they hit middle school to high school, it gets tough because they don't want to see you in the, they're trying to exert their independence, and they really don't want to see you in the school environment. So I get questions about that a lot. How do is it even good to stay involved in middle and high school because our students are pushing us away? But there are ways to be involved without you seeing them at school, but they know that you're involved. So I am a parent connector. I welcome new families. My son isn't necessarily present for that, but he knows that I regularly contribute to the school. And that's really important, because then he feels like it's an expectation of our family that we're involved, that we participate in school events.
Yeah. You're really a behind the scenes superstar, parents.
Parents do not get much reward for or recognition for what they do. And yet it is, I think, the most meaningful, purpose-led job in the world. And we don't talk enough about how parenting gives us a sense of purpose and meaning in life, and how, even though it is the most challenging role, it is also the most fulfilling in that way. So I think, elevating parenting, elevating the work of parenting and the work that parents do is part of my purpose, and helping people not feel so alone in it.
I love that. I feel like that's so important within any relationship. I think I'm a lot older and have flown the coop, but I try to tell my parents, thank you. And frequently, and I feel like, okay, you're a middle schooler, you're a high schooler, a lot of that really goes under the radar. That's fine. But I think it's important for parents to feel appreciated. And if it's not from their staff, then it's from their community, and so having that really, amplifies gratitude. Gratitude feels amazing. It really makes the soul and the body and the mind feel amazing. So any ways that parents and teachers can feel that way, I think is really important. So I thank you so much.
I love hearing you say that, and your gratitude to your parents is invaluable. It's affirmation that all the hard work that they put in has been seen and valued. And so keep that up, because that's so, even just little expressions can make all the difference in feeling appreciated.
Truly. I mean, you get older and you realize, who am I? Like you try to self-evaluate and you're like, why am I like this? All of these amazing qualities are because of this person. That doesn't really click until you're like a lot older. And,
That's right. It doesn't.
Yeah. When you're 18, you're like,
time.
Yeah. When you're 18, you're like, whatever,
Right. But it's already clicking for you. So that's hopeful.
Yeah, it clicks for a lot of people my age, around 30, 35, like even before, so I think it's really important to thank the people who really made that possible, whether it be your patients or whatever good characteristic you have, to thank those who came before you and really helped put that in place. But with that, I want to say thank you so much for being on the show. It was a really lovely time with you. We are out of time. But you can find this podcast online. Jennifer, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you. What a treat to talk with you and also get your perspectives as a young professional. And I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For those tuning in, If you'd like to learn more about Jennifer's work, be sure to check out her book and her blog, Confident Parents, Confident Kids, which continues to inspire families around the world. We will link both of those on our site at www.civiltalk.com/podcast. And thank you to all of you, our listeners, for being a part of this important conversation about civility, empathy, and SEL. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with anyone who could benefit from learning about these topics and its impact on children, teachers, parents, and communities. Until next time, keep striving for civility and empathy in all that you do. Take care.